She flinched before the door even opened. That's what fear had taught her, to expect pain before it arrived. At 17, her body already carried bruises that never fully faded. Her parents said she deserved them. They said she had ruined their lives. Every day the shouting came first, then the blows, then the silence that hurt even more. The worst part was what she hid beneath her loose clothes. She was pregnant. And in that house, pregnancy was not a mistake. It was a crime. That night the argument was louder than usual. Her mother's voice shook with rage. Her father's hand struck harder than before. When she fell to the floor, protecting her stomach, something inside her broke. Not her body, her fear. She waited until the house went quiet, until the lights went off, until no one was watching. Then she ran, no bag, no phone, no plan. She ran straight into the mountains, where the trees swallowed her footsteps and the cold air burned her lungs. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't go back. Hours passed. Her legs gave out. Snow brushed her shoes. And just as she thought this was where everything would end, she saw it. A small, hidden cabin. For as long as she could remember, home had never felt safe. It was a small house, quiet from the outside. Neighbors waved. Lights turned on every evening. No one ever suspected what happened behind the walls. Inside, every sound made her tense. Footsteps meant trouble. A raised voice meant pain was coming. Her parents stopped calling her by her name after she turned 16. She became the problem, the mistake, the shame. When they discovered she was pregnant, everything grew worse. Her mother screamed that she had ruined the family. Her father called her disgusting. They didn't ask how it happened. They didn't ask if she was scared. They only blamed her. Every day followed the same pattern. Words first, then hands, then silence. She learned to stay quiet, to keep her eyes down, to wear long sleeves even in summer. She learned how to fall in a way that hurt less, how to curl her body to protect her stomach. At night, she lay awake, one hand resting on the small bump that had started to form. She whispered apologies to the life growing inside her, promises she didn't know how to keep. She thought about running many times, but where could she go? She had no money, no friends, no one who would believe her. Her parents made sure of that. They told her again and again that no one would want her, that the world was worse than they were, that she would come crawling back. And for a long time she believed them. Until one evening changed everything. It started like the others, a slammed door, accusations thrown across the room, her mother crying in anger, her father's face red with rage. "You think you deserve help," he shouted. She tried to step away. She didn't see the chair until it hit the wall beside her. When she fell, her back struck the floor hard. Pain shot through her body. Her breath left her lungs. Her father raised his hand again. That was when she screamed, not in fear, in warning. "Stop!" she cried, clutching her stomach. For a moment there was silence. Then her mother laughed. "You care about that thing more than us," she said. Something inside her snapped. That night, as she lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, she made a decision she had avoided for months. She would leave, even if it meant sleeping outside. Even if it meant getting lost. Even if it meant never coming back. She waited, listened to the house fall quiet, listened to her parents breathing through the thin walls, then she stood up. She pulled on her shoes with shaking hands. She grabbed a jacket from the closet, nothing else. At the door she paused. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might wake them. She placed one hand on her stomach. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "But I'm going to save you." Then she opened the door and stepped into the cold night, leaving the only home she had ever known behind her, and she didn't look back. The cold hit her the moment she stepped outside. It wrapped around her like a warning. The road was empty. Streetlights faded behind her as she walked faster, then broke into a run. Her breath came in sharp bursts. Her heart raced, not just from fear but from the strange feeling of freedom. She didn't know where the mountains began. She only knew that if she kept moving forward, she wouldn't have to turn back. The houses disappeared one by one. Pavement turned to dirt. The air grew thinner and colder. Trees rose around her, tall and dark, their branches whispering as the wind passed through them. Her legs burned. Her chest ached. She slowed down, then stopped, leaning against a tree as nausea rolled through her. She pressed a hand to her mouth and breathed slowly, the way she had learned to do when things felt out of control. "I'm okay," she whispered. "We're okay." She didn't know who she was trying to convince. The path became steeper. Rocks slipped under her shoes. More than once she nearly fell. Each time fear shot through her body and she wrapped her arms around her stomach, panic tightening her chest. If she fell too hard, she pushed the thought away. The night grew quieter the deeper she went. No cars, no voices, only wind, footsteps, and her breathing. Hours seemed to pass. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. She froze. For a moment she thought about answering, thought about turning back, thought about the warm bed she had left behind. Then she remembered the floor, the shouting, the laughter. She turned the phone off and kept walking. Her fingers went numb. Her feet felt heavy. Hunger twisted in her stomach, mixing with fear until she wasn't sure which hurt more. She began to cry without realizing it. Silent tears slid down her face as she walked, each step harder than the last. "I can't do this," she whispered, but she did. Because stopping felt worse than moving forward. At some point the ground leveled out. She found herself on a narrow trail, barely visible in the moonlight. Snow dusted the edges. Her shoes soaked through. She stumbled. This time she fell. Pain shot through her knees and palms. She cried out softly, curling around her stomach, shaking. For a long moment she stayed there on the cold ground, breathing hard, staring at the dark sky through the trees. This was a mistake, her mind told her. She was alone, pregnant, lost. No one would find her. Just as panic threatened to swallow her whole, she noticed something strange. A shape, straight lines where there should only be trees. She blinked, wiping her eyes. Ahead of her, barely visible through the branches, was a structure, a roof, walls. Her heart pounded again, this time with something close to hope. A cabin, hidden deep in the mountains. She pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the pain, and took a shaky step toward it. She didn't know who lived there. She didn't know if it was safe. But at that moment, it was the only thing standing between her and the cold, and she had no other choice. The cabin looked abandoned. That was her first thought as she stepped closer. Its wooden walls were darkened by age and weather. Snow rested along the edges of the roof. One small window reflected the pale moonlight. No smoke came from the chimney. She stopped a few steps away, her heart racing again. What if someone dangerous lived there? What if it was empty and falling apart? She wrapped her arms around herself, torn between fear and exhaustion. Turning back was not an option. Her legs wouldn't carry her much farther. She walked up to the door and placed her hand on the handle. Cold metal. She hesitated. Then she knocked lightly at first. No answer. She knocked again, louder, still nothing. The silence felt heavy. Finally she pushed the door. It creaked open. The air inside was cold but still. The room was small. A single table, a chair, a fireplace filled with old ashes. Dust covered the floor, but there were footprints, not fresh, but not ancient either. Someone came here, just not often. She stepped inside slowly, every muscle tense. She closed the door behind her, not fully, just enough to block the wind. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness. There was a thin mattress near the wall, a stack of blankets folded neatly on a shelf. A few cans of food on a wooden counter. This wasn't abandoned. This was hidden. Her knees gave out. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, breathing hard as the fear finally caught up with her. Tears came fast now. Silent sobs shook her shoulders as she held her stomach tightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I'm trying." The baby kicked lightly, or maybe it was just her imagination. Either way, it made her cry harder. She forced herself to stand. The cold was still dangerous. She needed warmth. With shaking hands, she gathered some wood near the fireplace. It took several tries, but she managed to light a small fire using matches she found in a drawer. The flames flickered weakly at first, then grew steadier. Warmth spread slowly through the room. She wrapped herself in one of the blankets and sat close to the fire, watching the shadows dance on the walls. Her breathing finally slowed. She felt safe. Or at least safer than she had felt in years. Her eyes moved around the cabin again. There were small signs of care everywhere. Clean dishes stacked neatly, a broom in the corner, a shelf with old books, one photograph pinned near the window. She stood up and walked over. It showed a woman standing in front of the same cabin, younger, smiling softly at the camera. There was something familiar in her eyes, kindness, sadness, strength. She didn't know who the woman was, but she felt like the cabin belonged to someone who understood pain. Her eyelids grew heavy. The exhaustion finally won. She lay down on the mattress, the fire crackling softly nearby, one hand resting on her stomach. For the first time in a long while, she fell asleep without fear of footsteps in the hallway. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains. Inside the hidden cabin, a frightened girl slept. Unaware that this place was not just shelter, it was about to change everything. She woke to the sound of footsteps. Her eyes snapped open. Her heart slammed against her ribs. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then the fire, the blankets, the wooden walls came back to her. The cabin, the footsteps came again, slow, careful, outside. Panic surged through her body. She pushed herself up, every nerve screaming. Her first instinct was to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The cabin was too small. Every movement would be heard. She grabbed a piece of firewood and held it tightly, her hands shaking. The door handle moved. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, followed by a tall figure silhouetted against the morning light. She froze. "I'm not here to hurt you," a voice said softly, a woman's voice. The figure stepped inside and closed the door halfway. She removed her hood, revealing gray-streaked hair pulled back tightly and tired eyes that widened with surprise. "Oh," the woman said quietly, "you're just a child." Tears burned in the girl's eyes. "I'll leave," she whispered quickly. "I didn't mean to. I was cold. I didn't have anywhere else to go." The woman raised her hand slowly, showing she meant no harm. "Stop," she said gently. "Sit down before you fall." The girl swayed without realizing it. Her legs felt weak. The piece of wood slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. Before she could collapse, the woman crossed the room and caught her. "You're burning up," the woman murmured, "and you're shaking." The girl tried to pull away. "Please don't send me back." The woman stiffened. "Back where?" The girl swallowed hard. Her voice came out broken. "Home." The woman helped her sit near the fire and wrapped another blanket around her shoulders. "You're safe here," she said firmly. "No one is coming for you." The girl stared at her, unsure how to respond. The woman moved to the small stove and poured water into a pot. Her movements were calm, practiced. "I live here most of the year," she said quietly. "I come to town for supplies. I didn't expect anyone else to find this place." The girl nodded faintly. The woman glanced at her stomach and frowned. "You're pregnant." The girl flinched, bracing herself for anger, but it didn't come. Instead, the woman's face softened. "How far along?" "Almost 6 months," the girl whispered. The woman exhaled slowly, as if holding back emotion. "You shouldn't be out here alone," she said. "Not in your condition." The girl's eyes filled again. "I didn't have a choice." The woman handed her a warm cup. "Drink," she said, slowly. The warmth spread through the girl's hands, then her chest. The woman sat across from her. "What's your name?" she asked. The girl hesitated, then answered quietly. "Lena." The woman nodded. "I'm Mara." They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between them. Then Mara spoke again. "No one comes to these mountains by accident," she said gently. "Something very bad must have happened to make you run." Lena stared into the cup. Her fingers tightened. And for the first time, someone was waiting to hear the truth. Lena didn't speak right away. The words felt too heavy, like once she let them out, they would crush her. She stared into the cup, watching steam rise and disappear. Mara didn't rush her. She simply waited. Finally, Lena's shoulders began to shake. "They hit me," she said quietly. Mara's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent. "My parents," Lena continued, "every day after they found out," she swallowed hard, "they said I was disgusting, that I ruined everything. My father said the baby wasn't human. My mother watched and told him not to stop." Mara's hands curled slowly into fists. Lena kept talking, her voice flat now, like she had said these words too many times in her head. "I tried to be good. I cleaned. I stayed quiet. I hid the bruises. I thought if I didn't make noise, they would calm down." She let out a short, bitter breath. "They didn't." Mara leaned forward slightly. "Did anyone know?" Lena shook her head. "They told me no one would believe me. They said if I ran, they would say I was crazy or lying." She pressed a hand to her stomach. "I stayed because I was scared. And then one night, I thought they were going to kill me, or the baby." Her voice cracked at the end. Mara stood up slowly and walked to the small window, turning her back for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, but something inside it had changed. "You're not the first girl to run into these mountains," she said quietly. Lena looked up, surprised. "I was 19 when I came here," Mara continued. "Pregnant, bruised, afraid." Lena's eyes widened. Mara turned back around. "I didn't have a cabin then," she said. "Just a tent. And a lot of fear." She met Lena's eyes. "No one helped me either." The room felt very still. "They took my child," Mara said softly. "Social services said I wasn't fit. Said I ran away, so I must be unstable." Lena's breath caught. "I never saw him again," Mara continued. "But I stayed here. I learned how to survive. And I promised myself that if anyone ever came here like I did, I wouldn't turn them away." Tears streamed down Lena's face now. "You won't send me back," she whispered. Mara shook her head firmly. "No, but what if they come looking for me?" Mara's expression hardened. "Then they'll have to answer questions they don't want to hear." She reached into a drawer and pulled out an old phone. "There's a ranger station 2 hours from here," she said, "and a doctor in town who owes me a favor." Lena stared at her, overwhelmed. "I don't want to lose my baby," she whispered. Mara knelt in front of her. "You won't," she said, "not if I have anything to say about it." Lena felt something unfamiliar spread through her chest. Not fear, not pain, hope. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, brushing against the cabin walls. Inside, 2 broken lives sat facing each other. And for the first time, Lena wasn't alone anymore. The days that followed passed quietly, too quietly for Lena's mind to fully trust. Mara showed her how to move safely around the cabin, how to stack wood, how to melt snow for water, how to rest when her body demanded it. Nothing was rushed, nothing was forced. Lena slept more than she had in months. Each morning she woke expecting shouting, expecting pain. But there was only wind, firelight, and Mara humming softly while she worked. Slowly, Lena's body began to relax. One afternoon, as Lena folded a blanket, she felt a sharp tightening in her stomach. Panic rushed through her. "Mara," she whispered. Mara was beside her instantly. "Breathe," she said calmly, placing a hand on Lena's back. Slow. Deep. The pain passed after a few moments, but the fear stayed. "That happens sometimes," Mara said gently. "But we're not taking chances." That evening, they prepared to leave the mountains for the first time. Lena's hands shook as she packed the small bag Mara gave her. The thought of the outside world made her chest tighten. "What if they find me?" she asked quietly. Mara met her eyes. "They won't touch you again." The ranger station was small. The people there listened carefully, really listened. A doctor examined Lena and frowned at the bruises that still hadn't faded. "These didn't come from a fall," she said. Lena's voice barely worked when she spoke, but she spoke. For the first time, she told the truth to someone with the power to protect her. The next days moved quickly. Questions were asked. Reports were filed. Doors that had once felt locked began to open. Lena stayed in a safe place while everything was handled. She wasn't alone. Mara visited every day. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Lena sat on a porch wrapped in a blanket. Her hands rested on her stomach. "I thought I was weak," she said softly. Mara sat beside her. "You survived," she replied. "That's not weakness." Lena swallowed. "I ran." Mara smiled faintly. "Sometimes running is how you live." Weeks later, Lena returned to the mountains, not to hide, to breathe. The cabin no longer felt like an escape. It felt like a beginning. She stood outside, one hand on her stomach, the other resting on the doorframe. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt unknown, and that was enough, because Lena was no longer running toward the mountains. She was walking forward. And this time, she wasn't alone.